Global coffee consumption is set to reach new historical peaks this October, according to a fresh report from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. That increased demand will likely affect the price of your daily cup of joe, which has already been dealing with trickle-down effects from the trade war. CNA's Clara explains how tariffs affect coffee prices in the U.S. and the rest of the world.
Whether you get your caffeine fix from a cafe, a coffee shop, or make it at home, you might be paying more this year. Reports show that coffee prices rose 38.8% in 2024, and by the end of this year, coffee prices are expected to rise even further. U.S. President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs are partly to blame. The 10% duties hit most countries, including key coffee bean suppliers such as Brazil and Vietnam, where levies are set to rise to 46% in July. These tariff uncertainties are making things difficult for roasters, who don't have the option of growing beans on their own. That's because coffee plantations thrive near the equator and in high altitudes.
Countries around the world get their coffee beans from various sources, but the two main ones are Vietnam and Brazil. Together, they account for about half of the world's supply. But last year, prolonged dry weather in Vietnam caused a 20% drop in coffee production. Meanwhile, Brazil was hit by severe droughts. One bank estimates production from the country fell by 6.4%. On a global scale, green coffee exports were down about 14% on year in February, and lower supply means prices go up. This set a record price for raw coffee at about $9.70 per kilogram. Now, bear in mind that the price of beans isn't the only problem. The cost of other components such as fertilizer, milk, packaging, wages, and rent have also jumped. And circling back to those tariffs, roasters around the world are left to deal with aftershocks. For example, the trade war is weakening the US dollar, which has a direct impact on the coffee market.
Coffee are traded in US dollars. And when US dollar drops, exporting countries do not want to sell.
This has urged some suppliers to use fillers such as corn, wheat, and barley. When ground and mixed with coffee, the average consumer can't tell it apart from the real deal. The result is usually marketed as a coffee powder mixture. Mr. Lim explains that while his own roaster doesn't use fillers, some coffee shops are already putting them to work.
If you go outside the coffee shops nowadays, right, if you drink a cup of kopi, all is probably about 30% to 40% fillers right now.
But for cafes that prioritize quality, that isn't an option. So they're looking for other ways to deal with the rising costs.
I mean, we're all here to earn money at the end of the day, right? Absorbing it 100%, I think is definitely not the way to go. Instead, finding alternatives is possible. Looking towards blends, rather, let's say single origins, is one way.
50% of their house blend comes from Brazilian beans. The other 50% comes from Papua New Guinea. This keeps things cheaper and more supply chain resilient. But if costs continue to rise, cafes like Echo may be forced to raise prices.